Immediately after the judge in the sexual assault case against Bill Cosby declared a mistrial last weekend, the prosecutor, DA Kevin Steele, announced there would be a retrial.
We will evaluate and review our case. We will take a hard look at everything involved, and then we will retry it. As I said in court, our plan is to move this case forward as soon as possible.
Where Steele said we will take a hard look at everything involved and then we will retry it, perhaps he should have said we will take a hard look at everything and decide whether to retry it. First, Steele made that announcement without knowing the split among deadlocked jurors. One report now says there was a lopsided vote in favor of conviction, but another says there was more of an even deadlock with votes of 7-5 or 5-7. The quick decision to retry also raises some concerns that the prosecution has political overtones. Steele was elected over a former DA, Bruce Castor, partly on a pledge to prosecute Cosby, where Castor said there wasn't enough evidence to do so. Remember, key evidence that Steele presented was testimony Cosby had given in his civil case that he'd only agreed to because Castor had decided not to prosecute him. In other words, if Cosby believed he'd faced the risk of prosecution, he would certainly have invoked his Fifth Amendment right, and Andrea Constand would not have been paid. And Castor has said that's partly why he chose not to pursue the criminal case, to let her have a compensable civil suit, which was apparently the case. Another consideration is the age of the evidence. The underlying events are already 13 years old, and the evidence will not get any fresher. It's a he said, she said, without forensics. One juror told the Philadelphia Inquirer, quote, "They should have left it closed. There wasn't enough evidence to move the case forward. No stained garment, no smoking gun, nothing." Then there's the cost consideration, both financial and emotional. Judge Stephen O'Neill noted that the first trial had been, quote, "probably the largest undertaking in this county in terms of what it put on our criminal justice system." In a post-trial presser, Steele said this.
You can't put a price tag on justice, and if you do, you're saying that because somebody's wealthy or famous that they don't deserve the same kind of justice that everybody else does.
But actually, only a defendant with Cosby's wealth could sustain two complex trials with high-priced legal talent. Anybody else might be tempted to take a plea agreement regardless of whether the facts warrant. But here's the biggest consideration of all: the reach of another hung jury or even a defense verdict on victims of sexual assault. What impact might that have on future victims if they see an unsuccessful prosecution of a defendant in a high-profile case? Might it have a chilling effect against reporting? One of Cosby's alleged victims disagrees with me in this respect and told me there is value in the prosecution of this case because of the conversation that it has begun. Last week, before the verdict, here on CNN, I interviewed Victoria Valentino, one of the many women who've come forward with claims of sexual assault against Cosby. Valentino asserts that Cosby raped her in 1969 when she was 26 and grieving the loss of her 6-year-old son who had just drowned in a swimming pool. She attended every day of Cosby's trial. So after the mistrial, I had her back, this time on my radio show, and asked about the pluses and minuses of living through a retrial. Here's what she said.
Well, you know, the conversation is open. It's on the table. We're talking about it. People are coming out of the woodwork because we spoke out. And suddenly there are so many people coming to us through private messaging on Facebook, through finding us on email, telling us about their own personal stories of rape, incest.
But if the next trial ends the same way, I asked, might it send women the message, you can't win even if you do come forward?
It's often the reason why women stay silent. They're afraid. They feel not believed. They feel shamed. They feel dirty. They feel humiliated. And they're just, bottom line, afraid to speak out for not being believed. And then, of course, historically, the legal system has re-victimized them, the victim. So hopefully we will have a shift. All I can say is that the conversation is open, on the table, we're talking about it, and it's not going to go away. The work goes on.
She raises good points, and don't misunderstand, I'm not judging Constand, Cosby, nor second-guessing the jury's deliberation. They saw the evidence. They weighed the testimony of the witnesses. They found it inconclusive. I'm just saying that the decision as to whether this case should be retried is complicated. Of course, if retrial ends in a guilty verdict, nobody's going to second-guess the DA, but that's about the only certainty that remains in this case.